joined now by the former chair of the Defence Select Committee, Tory MP Tobias Ellwood. Tobias, a very good evening to you. Welcome to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham. You're just in time. We've just got a story from the FT front page about some leaked files from Russia. Vladimir Putin apparently has been rehearsing the use of a tactical nuclear weapon, and supposedly the bar for its use is much lower, and we're told, than anyone in the military has ever seen.
We shouldn't be spooked by this. I think it'll be something that will be digested and appreciated. But from the very start of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, he's tried to perhaps get the West to be intimidated, to become risk averse, or continue a sense of apprehension as to what might happen next. We need to absolutely monitor the escalatory ladder, but it should not at all deter us from helping the Ukrainian people. I was there on the weekend, and they are short of their munitions by half. Russia is able to outgun them 5 times from an artillery perspective, compared with what the Ukrainians are receiving. We need to up our game. We need to recognize that Russia will not stop here if he's able to claim any form of success. And this is a European war. We are involved, and he wants to emulate his hero Stalin. He's actually more powerful than Stalin, because Stalin at least had a communist regime in the Kremlin holding him back. What happened to Navalny shows that Putin has crushed any opposition in Russia completely. So this talk potentially of using tactical nuclear weapons absolutely needs to be taken into consideration, and I'm sure will be discussed by the Five Eyes community, by NATO, and indeed by the UK as well. But I hope it won't distract us from our primary objective at the moment, given European security, of supporting Ukraine.
And are you one of those Tory MPs who thinks that Jeremy Hunt should be setting aside a bit more money for defence? Because defence chiefs keep telling me that, you know, they haven't got as much money as they would like. They need more money, particularly now that we're living in more dangerous times. And yet the Treasury doesn't seem to want to stump up, you know, the actual cash.
Well, I've been calling for us to move to 3% for some time, for the very reason we're talking about, to build our resilience. Let's be honest, there is a 1930s feel to the world right now, where countries are starting to form new dangerous alliances. They're rearming and so forth. This is our period in which we can take stock ourselves of perhaps the storm clouds gathering again. It also, though, is an election year too. And as I mentioned before, if I'm saying Europe is at war, but people in Britain don't perhaps appreciate that Europe is back at war again, that penny must drop, and then more people like you and me will be placing pressure on government to increase the defence budget. So I suspect that whoever wins the next general election, there will be another review to upgrade our defence posture for the very reasons that we've just been discussing.
Can you imagine Sir Keir Starmer wanting to spend more money on defence?
Well, you know, it's interesting you say that, because perhaps Labour over decades have always had perhaps a hesitant perspective when it comes to defence. The military has actually done very well, because they don't ever want to be accused of not providing the money that's required. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes. Ultimately, I want our Conservative government to increase defence budget, not just to 2.5%, but ultimately to 3% as well.
Right. And speaking of sort of conflict, there's quite a bit of conflict back here. Obviously, what happened last week in the House of Commons has been much discussed. It now turns out that we're going to spend £31 million of taxpayers' money to protect MPs and to ensure that they can continue to work in the Palace of Westminster. You were the unfortunate recipient, Tobias, of a sort of flash mob outside your home down in the West Country there a couple of weeks ago. What is going on? And do you not think that if we're going to pay all this money out to protect MPs, that we should know who's actually making these threats?
There's no doubt about it. But we should make it very clear that how democracy is affected if good people don't step forward. You know, I've just sort of alluded to what's happened in the past, in the 1930s and so on. What country was it that stepped forward? It was Britain. We did so because we had the leadership, the capability, the strength to do so that came from good people stepping forward to become parliamentarians, to then form the governments, not just in that period, but going back in our past. Now, if good people don't want to continue to come forward today, Britain is all the more weaker for that. So it is important that anybody considering stepping forward into public life does feel safe. And right now, you can understand that people will take the judgment, given what happened to me. But I should also say to many other colleagues as well, sometimes on a smaller scale, and particularly to women MPs too, that people do not feel safe. And that's to do with other challenges in our society and so forth. It's also to do with how people have chosen to test perhaps the boundaries or what is acceptable to protest in public, in the public space at the moment.
And what was it like for you to have that mob outside your house? And what did you tell your children when they were wondering why people were holding up banners that said you had blood on your hands?
Absolutely astonishing. We were actually informed by the police and give them their due. They monitor these things very carefully on the internet and so forth, in social media. And they advised, do not go home. Do not go back to your house. But the fact that I couldn't go back to my house shows the power that's been perhaps utilized by these people. I think we've discussed on your program in the past, the new legislation that was required to protect war memorials. Now, in a normal society, you wouldn't need that extra legislation because we would actually agree you shouldn't be behaving that way. You should have respect and reverence for war memorials. But as I say, not just this kind of protest, but all sorts of protests. They are testing the boundaries of what is acceptable. And it's so important then that as a society as a whole, not just Parliament and us legislating, but all of us condemn this sort of behaviour. Absolutely right that you're allowed to demonstrate, but not outside parliamentarian's house. Indeed, anybody in public office, in fact.
Right. No, I think that would be something that most people would agree with. Tobias, thank you very much indeed. Tobias Ellwood there talking to us about the state we are in, not only in terms of our defence budget, but in terms of what we need to do right here at home.